The story of From Homeless to Millionaire, my 10-year journey. The fall. 10 years ago, I had no idea that my entire world was about to crumble. At that time, I was living in a modest one-bedroom apartment on the north side of Chicago. I had a steady sales job at a regional electronics firm. Nothing flashy, but it paid the bills. I had a car, a beat-up Honda Civic that coughed every morning but got me where I needed to go. My fridge was usually stocked, I had a gym membership I barely used, and my weekends were filled with beers, pizza, and Netflix. From the outside, life looked normal. But inside, I was unraveling. It started with a phone call. My mom had a heart attack. She died on the operating table. Just like that, no warning, no goodbye. She was my rock, the person who always believed in me, who reminded me of my worth when I doubted myself. Losing her felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out the one thing holding me together. I took a few days off work. Then a week. I couldn't concentrate. I didn't shower. I stopped returning calls. I stared at the ceiling for hours, unable to move. I started drinking to sleep, then drinking to wake up. The fog never lifted, and then came the panic attacks. Out of nowhere, in the middle of the grocery store or driving on the highway, my chest would tighten like a vice, my vision would blur, and I'd have to pull over, gasping for breath. I told my manager I needed more time. He said they were restructuring anyway and my position had been eliminated. Just like that, I was unemployed. Rent was still due, so were the utilities. I tried applying for jobs, but I'd show up to interviews disheveled, eyes bloodshot, barely able to make it through a sentence without my voice cracking. I couldn't fake normal anymore. Rejection after rejection piled up. Then my car broke down. I didn't have money to fix it, so I sold it for $600, just enough to pay rent for another month. I remember the last night I spent in my apartment. I packed up the few things I still had of value, my laptop, a small box of photos, and some clothes. I sat on the floor and cried until the sun rose. Then I left the keys on the counter, closed the door, and walked away. There was no dramatic eviction notice, no cops. Just silence. And emptiness. For a week, I crashed on a friend's couch. Then another friend's. But people get tired of hosting someone who can't contribute. And I was too ashamed to admit how bad things were. Eventually, the invites dried up. I slept in a shelter next. The smell was overwhelming. A mix of bleach, sweat, and despair. Everyone there was carrying their own wounds, mental illness, addiction, broken families. It was loud, chaotic. I was too scared to sleep. I clutched my backpack like it was my only lifeline. After 2 weeks, I stopped going. I chose the streets instead. There was more freedom in misery than in that cage. It was winter. Chicago doesn't forgive in winter. The first night sleeping outside, I found a space beneath a bridge near the river. The concrete was freezing, and I had nothing but a hoodie and a thin blanket I'd found in a donation bin. I curled into myself and prayed not to freeze. I didn't sleep. I just stared up at the graffiti-covered ceiling, wondering how I'd fallen so far so fast. Days became a blur. I stood in line at soup kitchens. Sometimes for 2 hours in the cold just to get a cup of soup and a stale roll. I learned where the public restrooms were. I washed my face in library sinks. I collected bottles to trade for change. I begged, something I swore I'd never do. People looked through me. Some gave $1, others gave a disgusted glance. And a few offered a smile, a nod, like they saw the human behind the dirt. I began to forget what my own voice sounded like. One morning, I woke up soaked. A slush of dirty water had seeped under my blanket. My fingers were purple. My shoes, too tight, with holes, offered no protection. I limped to a warming shelter and sat in a chair all day, just to feel my toes again. This became the rhythm. Wake, wander, wait, hide, repeat. And yet, through it all, I never truly gave up. Even as the darkness crept closer. Even when I thought of ending it all. One night, I sat on a bench in Millennium Park. It was snowing, but the flakes were soft, floating like feathers. I watched tourists walk by, laughing, taking selfies. And for the first time in months, I felt something flicker inside. Not hope, not yet, but the faintest whisper, "You're still here." That was the night I saw the flyer. It was stapled to a power pole outside a shelter. Want to learn to code? Free bootcamp for veterans, refugees, and people experiencing homelessness. No experience needed. Spots limited. Apply inside. I stared at it for 10 minutes. Coding. Me. I barely knew how to restart a computer. But something about it felt like a lifeline. Like a rope being lowered down into the pit. The next morning, I walked into the shelter office and asked about the flyer. The volunteer smiled and handed me a clipboard. "You're not the first. Fill this out." I did, nervously, hands shaking. I wrote down every detail. My last job, my education, my housing status, even the address of the bridge I slept under. A week later, I got a call. I had to borrow a phone to answer it. "Hi, is this Marcus? We'd like to offer you a spot in the next cohort of the Code Horizons bootcamp. Classes start Monday at 9 a.m. Can you make it?" I almost dropped the phone. "Yes," I said, "yes, I'll be there." And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. The climb begins. When Monday came, I showed up to the Code Horizons bootcamp at exactly 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes early. The location wasn't a sleek tech office but the basement of a church in downtown Chicago. The long folding tables were lined with donated laptops, and a whiteboard covered in marker scribble stood at the front of the room. There were about 15 of us. Most, like me, had fallen on hard times. There were veterans struggling with PTSD, single mothers who had lost their jobs, people who had aged out of foster care, and a few former inmates trying to rebuild their lives. The instructor, Maya, introduced herself first. She was in her early 40s, a former software engineer with a calm but no-nonsense energy. "I know where you've been," she said. "I was homeless once too. A single mother, working minimum wage, sleeping in my car with my son in the back seat. Coding saved my life, and it can save yours too." Her words hit me like a jolt of electricity. I didn't know anything about coding. Computers had always felt foreign, something used by people in fancy offices, not guys like me who barely had an address. But if Maya had done it, maybe I could too. She wrote, "Hello, world," on the whiteboard. "This," she said, "is usually the first thing you learn to print in any programming language. It's like saying hello to a new beginning." I wanted a new beginning. The struggle of learning from nothing. For the first few weeks, I felt like an alien. We started with HTML and CSS, the basic building blocks of websites. It should have been easy, but even simple things confused me. I didn't understand why some lines of code worked and others didn't. Every time I got an error, I felt like a failure. I wasn't the only one struggling. James, a former truck driver, slammed his laptop shut one day and walked out. "I'm too dumb for this," he muttered. He never came back. I almost quit too. Every day, I felt the weight of being homeless pressing on me. I still slept in shelters, still woke up at 5 a.m. to get in line for food, still carried everything I owned in a backpack. Learning to code felt impossible when my basic survival wasn't even guaranteed. But I kept showing up. Maya had a rule: you can fail as many times as you want, but you can't quit. So I didn't quit. I stayed late. I borrowed programming books from the library. When the church's Wi-Fi cut out, I walked 5 miles to the 24-hour McDonald's just to practice. I watched YouTube tutorials until my eyes burned. And slowly, something started to click. The first small victory. One day, Maya gave us a challenge. Build a simple web page about yourself. Just one page, but it has to tell a story. I hesitated. What story did I have? Homeless man trying to learn code wasn't exactly inspiring. But then I thought about what had brought me here, the nights sleeping under the bridge, the flyer that had changed my life, the hunger to be something more. So I built a page with a simple title. Still standing. I used the most basic code, just a black background with white text. No fancy images, no animations, just a paragraph that said, "My name is Marcus. A year ago, I had a job, a home, and a future. Then I lost it all. But I'm still here, and I'm still fighting." When I presented it to the class, Maya nodded approvingly. "This," she said, "is why I teach." For the first time in years, I felt like I was good at something. The job tracker app, my first real project. By the 3rd month, we moved on to JavaScript, the programming language that made websites interactive. This was a turning point for me. HTML and CSS felt like decorations, but JavaScript felt like power. With it, I could make things move, react, and change. It was like unlocking a new part of my brain. Our next assignment was to build a simple project that solved a real-world problem. I thought about my life. The biggest problem I faced wasn't just finding a job, it was keeping track of where I had applied, who I had spoken to, and what I needed to follow up on. So I built a job tracker app. It wasn't much, just a basic form where users could input job applications, mark interviews, and track responses. But it worked, and for the first time, I felt like I had created something useful. When I showed it to Maya, she was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled. "This is good," she said. "Really good. My first freelance gig minus $200 that felt like $2 million. Maya wasn't just teaching us coding, she was preparing us for the real world. One of her biggest lessons was about freelancing. "You don't need a degree to get paid," she said. "You need skills. And you already have them." She encouraged us to create LinkedIn profiles and join freelance job boards. I was skeptical. Who would hire a homeless guy with no experience? But Maya wouldn't let me give up. "Post about your job tracker app," she said. "Someone will see it." So I did. A week later, a small startup reached out. They needed a simple landing page for their business. They offered me $200 to build it. $200. That was more than I had made in months. That was food, a new pair of shoes, a few nights in a cheap motel where I could sleep without fear. I worked on that landing page like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. I polished every pixel. I tested every button. When I sent it to the client, my hands were shaking. They loved it. I got paid the next day. $200 landed in my PayPal account. It felt like a miracle. A glimpse of the future. That first freelance gig changed everything. It wasn't just about the money, it was about possibility. If someone was willing to pay me for a simple website, what else could I do? I started applying for more gigs. Some I got, some I didn't, but every rejection stung a little less. Every project made me better. Every line of code felt like one step closer to freedom. 6 months after I walked into that basement, I had built a small portfolio. I was still homeless, but now I had a laptop, a growing list of skills, and hope. And then, something incredible happened. Maya pulled me aside one day. "A friend of mine is hiring a junior developer. It's an entry-level role. Nothing fancy, but it's stable. I think you're ready." For the first time in years, someone believed in me enough to recommend me for a real job. I swallowed hard. "What do I have to do?" She smiled. "Just show them what you can do." And that's exactly what I did. The breakthrough. For the past 6 months, I had been learning to code in a basement classroom, freelancing for small gigs, and scraping by. But now, thanks to Maya's recommendation, I had a chance at something bigger, my first full-time developer job. It felt unreal. I had never sat through a formal tech interview before. My resume was thin, just a few freelance projects, a job tracker app, and my determination. But I was determined to make it work. The interview that changed everything. The company Maya referred me to was called Bright Web Solutions, a small but growing tech firm in downtown Chicago. When I walked into their office, I felt completely out of place. Everyone was dressed in smart casual outfits, sitting at desks with giant monitors, talking about scalability and cloud infrastructure. Meanwhile, I was wearing my only decent outfit, a button-up shirt I had bought from a thrift store the day before, tucked into a pair of worn-out slacks. I took a deep breath and met with Derek, the hiring manager. He was in his mid-30s, wearing a hoodie, jeans, and a confident smile. "So, Marcus," he said, flipping through my thin resume. "Tell me about yourself." This was it, the moment I had to prove I belonged here. I told him my story, but not as a sob story. I framed it as resilience. I lost everything a year ago, I admitted. But instead of giving up, I taught myself to code. I built a job tracker app, worked on freelance projects, and now I want to take the next step. Derek nodded. "That's impressive. We don't usually hire people without formal experience, but we like problem solvers. Let's see what you can do." Then came the coding test. He gave me a simple challenge: write a function that sorts a list of names alphabetically. I panicked at first. My hands shook. I could feel sweat forming on my back. But then I remembered something Maya always said. "You've done this before. Just breathe and write." So I did. I wrote the function in JavaScript. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. Derek glanced at it, then smiled. "Not bad. You've got the right mindset." He leaned back in his chair. "Marcus, we're willing to give you a shot. It's an entry-level role, but if you work hard, there's room to grow." My heart nearly stopped. I had done it. I had landed my first real job as a software developer. The reality of starting from the bottom. My official title was Junior Web Developer. The salary, $50,000 a year. To someone else, that might not have been much. But to me, it was a fortune. It meant I could afford rent. It meant I could eat real meals. It meant I could stop living in shelters and actually start living. I found a small studio apartment, just one room and a tiny kitchenette, but it was mine. Sleeping on an actual bed for the first time in a year felt surreal. But my challenges were far from over. Imposter syndrome hits hard. On my first day at Bright Web, I realized just how little I knew. I had learned coding through self-study and boot camps. But working on real-world projects was completely different. My first task was to fix a bug in an existing project. The codebase was huge, thousands of lines of code, written by multiple developers. I had no idea where to start. I stared at the screen for hours, clicking through files, trying to understand how everything connected. I felt like an imposter. Like at any moment, Derek would realize he had made a mistake hiring me. That night, I barely slept. I was terrified that I'd get fired before I even got started. But then I remembered what got me here in the first place: perseverance. So I asked for help. I swallowed my pride and went to one of the senior developers, Anika, and said, "I don't understand this part of the code. Can you walk me through it?" To my surprise, she didn't judge me. She smiled. "Oh, yeah, it's tricky at first. Let me show you." She explained the structure, pointed out the key functions, and gave me tips on debugging. For the first time, I realized something important. No one expects you to know everything. They just expect you to learn. Small wins and first paycheck. Over the next few months, I started getting better. I fixed my first bug. Then my second. Then I built a small feature, a form validation function that made sure users entered their emails correctly. They were tiny wins, but each one boosted my confidence. Then, the moment I had been waiting for, my first paycheck. I stared at the numbers on the screen. $3,500 after taxes. More money than I had seen in years. I could pay rent without worrying. I bought new clothes. I replaced my old, worn-out shoes. And for the first time in a long time, I treated myself to a real meal, a steak dinner at a restaurant. Sitting there, eating that meal, I realized something. I had made it out of the worst. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building a life. A turning point. My first big project. 6 months into the job, Derek pulled me aside. "You've been doing great," he said. "I think you're ready for more responsibility." He assigned me to a project building a dashboard for a client. It was the biggest challenge I had faced so far. But I tackled it head on. I stayed late, researched best practices, and pushed myself harder than ever before. And when the project was completed, the client loved it. That was the moment I stopped feeling like an imposter. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just a guy who got lucky. I was a real developer. The beginning of something bigger. One night, I sat in my apartment, staring at my laptop. I thought about the journey so far, from sleeping under a bridge to earning my first paycheck as a developer. I had come so far. But I knew this was only the beginning. If I could get this far in just a year, what else was possible? Could I start my own business? Could I become financially independent? Could I go from homeless to millionaire? I didn't have all the answers. But I had something more important. The belief that I could do it. And that was enough. From stability to success. Now that Marcus had found stability in his job as a junior web developer, the next stage of his journey began, learning how to grow beyond just having a steady paycheck. He had survived the hardest part, but now he wanted more than just a comfortable life. He wanted financial freedom. This chapter focuses on how he leveled up his skills, built multiple income streams, and took his first steps toward becoming a millionaire. The first taste of extra income. After 6 months at Bright Web, Marcus had finally found stability. He had an apartment, food in his fridge, and no longer lived in constant fear of being homeless again. But one thing still bothered him: he was completely dependent on his paycheck. Sure, $50,000 a year was a lot compared to where he had been, but after rent, bills, taxes, and groceries, he wasn't exactly getting rich. And if something happened, if he lost his job, he could easily fall back into the same situation he had fought so hard to escape. That's when he remembered freelancing. He had already done small gigs before landing his job. What if he could keep doing them on the side? One night, he logged back into Upwork and Fiverr, two freelance platforms where people hired developers for small projects. He updated his profile, added his bright web experience, and increased his rates from $10 per hour to $30 per hour. At first, nothing happened. Then, one day, he got an offer. A small business needed a simple landing page redesign. Budget, $500. He accepted immediately. It took him 3 nights of work after his regular job, but when the client sent him the payment, Marcus realized something powerful. This was money he earned on his own terms. Not from an employer, not from a paycheck, but from his own skills. That's when he knew, a job alone wouldn't make him rich. He needed multiple income streams. Learning high-income skills. Marcus was a decent developer, but he knew that just writing code wasn't enough to make serious money. He started researching the highest-paying skills in tech. He found 3 areas that caught his attention. 1. Full-stack development, being able to build an entire web application, front-end and back-end. 2. Automation and AI, companies were paying huge money for tools that could automate tasks. 3. E-commerce and digital marketing, businesses needed websites that sold products and made money. Instead of watching Netflix after work, Marcus spent his nights learning. He took Udemy courses on full-stack development. He read books about how businesses use technology to scale. He built small projects just for practice, like a chatbot that could answer customer questions automatically. It was hard work, but he could feel himself leveling up. And then, his biggest freelance opportunity yet arrived. The $5,000 e-commerce website. One day, a small clothing brand reached out to him. They wanted an e-commerce website that could handle payments, product listings, and customer management. Their budget, $5,000. It was 10 times more than his first freelance job. Marcus hesitated. Could he really handle this? Then he reminded himself, you were homeless a year ago. You figured things out, you'll figure this out too. So he accepted. For the next 4 weeks, he worked tirelessly, coding at Bright Web during the day and building the e-commerce store at night. By the time he delivered the final product, the client was thrilled. And when he saw the $5,000 payment hit his account, Marcus realized he had officially made more in 1 month than most people did in 2. This was the moment he knew he had a choice. He could keep working a job and build wealth slowly, or he could bet on himself and create a life on his own terms. The exit plan. As much as he appreciated Bright Web, Marcus started feeling like his job was holding him back. He was making $50,000 a year from his 9-to-5 job. He had just made $5,000 in a month from freelancing. If he went all in on freelancing, he could potentially double or triple his income. But quitting his job was risky. What if freelancing dried up? What if he failed? Instead of rushing, Marcus made a plan. He decided he wouldn't quit his job until he had checkmark $20,000 saved, 6 months of living expenses. Checkmark a steady stream of freelance clients. Checkmark a backup income source in case freelancing slowed down. For the next 6 months, he grinded harder than ever. He took on bigger freelance projects. He worked weekends. He saved aggressively, 50% of everything he earned. By the time he hit $25,000 in savings, he was earning more from freelancing than his full-time job. That's when he knew it was time to leave his 9-to-5 and go all in on himself. Becoming his own boss. The day Marcus quit his job was one of the scariest moments of his life. But it was also the most liberating. He was now a full-time entrepreneur. No boss, no fixed salary, just his skills and his hustle. At first, he focused 100% on freelancing. But then, he started thinking bigger. If he wanted to become a millionaire, he couldn't just trade time for money. He needed something scalable. The first business venture. That's when he had an idea. Why not start his own web development agency? Instead of just doing projects by himself, he could hire other developers, get bigger clients, and scale up. He put together a website, branded himself as M. Carter Web Solutions, and started reaching out to businesses that needed websites. At first, it was slow. But then, one of his old clients referred him to a bigger company. This new client needed a custom software solution and had a budget of $50,000. That's when Marcus realized, this wasn't just freelancing anymore. This was a real business. He hired 2 other developers to help with the workload. The project was a success. The client was happy, and suddenly, Marcus was running an agency. The path to $1 million. Over the next 2 years, his business grew exponentially. He hired more developers. He landed bigger and bigger clients. He started investing profits into other income streams, stocks, real estate, and passive online businesses. By the time he hit year 5, his company had generated over $1 million in revenue. And the best part, he had done it on his own terms. The rise to millionaire status. Marcus had left behind the days of freelancing alone in his apartment. His web agency was growing, clients were happy, and the cash flow was strong. But he knew that running a service-based business, even a profitable one, wasn't the only key to wealth. He had to be strategic, not just hardworking. This is the story of how he made the leap from six-figure earner to millionaire, through discipline, smart investing, and a relentless hunger for growth. A new vision. 2 years into running his agency, Marcus had hired 4 full-time developers, 2 designers, and a part-time project manager. They were completing 5 to 6 client projects a month, ranging from $10,000 to $50,000 each. Revenue was nearing $500,000 per year, and Marcus himself was taking home over $120,000. But with greater income came a new challenge. What do I do with this money? He refused to fall into the lifestyle trap, buying expensive cars, designer clothes, or a luxury condo. He remembered being broke. He remembered the cold nights. He remembered hunger. So instead, Marcus lived simply and decided to turn his income into wealth. Chapter 2. The Power of Investing. Marcus began learning everything he could about investing. Stock market fundamentals, real estate investing, building passive income streams, index funds versus individual stocks, risk management and diversification. He started with a simple investment strategy. 60% of his savings went into low-cost index funds like the S&P 500. 20% went into real estate savings. 10% he used to experiment with high-growth stocks and startups. 10% he kept in cash for emergencies and opportunities. Each month, he automatically invested $5,000, $8,000. Over the next 3 years, the magic of compound growth took over. His investments began to grow, slowly at first, then more rapidly. By the end of year 7, his stock portfolio alone was worth over $200,000. Real estate and rental income. Next came real estate. Marcus had read that millionaires often build wealth by owning cash-flowing assets. So instead of buying a flashy home, he bought a duplex in a growing suburb just outside Chicago. The purchase price was $180,000. He put 20% down, financed the rest, and rented both units out for a total of $2,200 per month. After mortgage, taxes, and maintenance, he cleared $500 per month in profit. The best part, the property's value increased. Within 18 months, it appraised at $230,000. That $50,000 in appreciation was equity he could leverage. Encouraged by this, he repeated the process. Over the next 2 years, Marcus bought 4 more rental properties, each generating monthly cash flow. Together, they were netting him $2,500 minus $3,000 per month in passive income. By now, he had developed 3 key income streams. 1. His agency salary, $120,000 plus. 2. Investment portfolio growth, $200,000 plus. 3. Real estate rental cash flow, $30,000 plus per year. And he was just getting started. Creating scalable online products. Marcus realized that although freelancing and running an agency were profitable, they required time and team management. What if he could build something that earned him money while he slept? He turned to digital products. He had years of experience now. Building websites, running a tech business, managing clients, hiring and scaling. So he began creating online courses teaching web development and business skills. E-books about freelancing, productivity, and investing. A paid newsletter with weekly business insights. The first course he launched, Freelance Developer Starter Kit, brought in $15,000 in the first month. Soon after, he built a YouTube channel around his journey and tips for self-taught developers, which grew to over 100,000 subscribers in 1 year. With YouTube ads, affiliate links, sponsorships, and product sales, he now had a fourth income stream, and a new identity, content creator and educator. Hitting the $1 million net worth. Marcus tracked his net worth obsessively. Every month, he tallied stock portfolio growth, property equity, cash reserves, business profits, passive income streams. At the end of year 8, he sat down with his spreadsheet and stared at the total. $1,019,422. He had done it. He was officially a millionaire. Not because of luck, not because of some viral success, but because he followed a disciplined, focused plan. 1. Earn money through skills and value creation. 2. Save aggressively. 3. Invest intelligently. 4. Create systems that scale. Giving back and growing more. The moment he became a millionaire, Marcus didn't buy a Lamborghini. Instead, he started a mentorship program for young people from low-income backgrounds. People who, like him, felt stuck in life with no direction. He called it Code to Freedom. The program taught coding, freelancing, business, and personal finance. Hundreds applied, dozens graduated, some even launched their own businesses and started earning six figures. The more Marcus gave, the more he grew, not just in wealth, but in purpose. He also started investing in startups led by underrepresented founders. Some failed, but a few grew, and one even went on to raise a Series A round, doubling Marcus's original investment. Final thoughts on the journey. Looking back on the past 10 years, Marcus saw a timeline that looked like this. Year 0. Homeless, living in shelters, broke, no direction. Year 1. Bootcamp plus coding grind. Year 2. First developer job. Year 3 to 4. Freelancing plus side hustle. Year 5 to 6. Business launch, full-time entrepreneur. Year 7 to 8. Investing, real estate, online products. Year 9 to 10. Passive income, content creation, hitting $1 million net worth. He had gone from rock bottom to the top, not because he was special, but because he refused to give up. His final message: anyone can do this. You don't need rich parents or an Ivy League degree. You just need time, discipline, and a relentless belief in yourself. Life beyond wealth. After 10 years of relentless struggle, discipline, learning, and building, Marcus had reached what most people would call the dream. He was a millionaire. Not just in income, but in net worth, time, freedom, and independence. But instead of celebration, what met him was a quiet realization. Now what? This part of Marcus's story dives deep into what happens after success. Beyond the dollar signs, beyond the spreadsheets. This is the chapter where Marcus learns that money is only the beginning, and that true purpose lies in what you do once you're free. Chapter 1. The emptiness of arrival. Marcus always imagined that once he hit $1 million, life would be pure bliss. He thought he'd feel different, powerful, accomplished, maybe even untouchable. But that moment came and went like a regular Tuesday. No confetti, no clarity, just space. He sat in his quiet office that day and whispered to himself, "I made it." Then followed a haunting question. But who am I, now that I have everything I wanted? The identity he'd carried for years, the hustler, the underdog, the guy who never gave up, started to feel outdated. He was no longer just surviving. Now he had to live, and that required a whole new mindset. Chapter 2. The shift from accumulation to alignment. Marcus had spent the last decade learning how to earn, save, invest, and grow. He knew how to build systems, optimize for returns, and hit goals. But now he felt a pull towards something deeper: alignment. He started asking different questions. What values am I actually living by? What kind of man do I want to become? What legacy do I want to leave? This wasn't about creating more income streams anymore. It was about making sure his life reflected what mattered most to him: integrity, impact, creativity, and freedom. He realized wealth was just a tool, a lever to create the life he wanted. And now it was time to design that life with intention. Chapter 3. Giving back, the birth of Code to Freedom. Marcus reflected on his early years. Sleeping in shelters, learning to code in public libraries. No mentors, no guidance, no blueprint. He knew there were thousands of young people out there just like he had been. Hungry, lost, capable, but stuck. That's when he founded Code to Freedom, a nonprofit mentorship and education platform that taught underserved youth how to code, how to freelance, how to start online businesses, how to manage money and invest. The goal wasn't just to teach skills, it was to unlock freedom. Economic freedom, creative freedom, life freedom. The first cohort was 12 students. He funded it himself. By the end of the 6-month program, 9 of them had landed their first freelance gigs or jobs. One started their own agency. Another got hired by a tech startup. Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years, deep fulfillment. Chapter 4. Slowing down to speed up. For the first time in years, Marcus stopped running. Not because he was tired, but because he no longer needed to outrun poverty, self-doubt, or fear. He started traveling, not to escape, but to experience. He read books slowly, took long walks, meditated in silence. He started journaling every morning, not to plan, but to reflect. And in that space, something powerful happened. New ideas started flowing. Because he wasn't grinding all day, his creativity returned. Because he had peace, his confidence deepened. Because he had time, his relationships flourished. He learned that real wealth wasn't just about money, it was time, energy, and freedom of choice. Chapter 5. Investing in people. Marcus realized that one of the most impactful things he could do was invest in people, not just with money, but with belief, mentorship, and time. He started angel investing in small startups founded by immigrants, formerly incarcerated individuals, women of color, first-generation founders. He wasn't chasing unicorns, he was planting seeds. Many failed, a few broke even, but one changed everything, an education tech startup from a former Code to Freedom graduate. That company eventually raised a Series A and scaled to help over 100,000 students. Marcus cried when it happened. Not for the money, but for the proof that people can rise, if someone just gives them a chance. Chapter 6. Redefining legacy. Marcus once thought legacy meant, build a company that lasts 100 years, or, make $10 million. But now, his view had shifted. Legacy, to him, meant, every person he helped escape poverty. Every kid who believed in themselves because of his story. Every message from someone who said, "You changed my life." He started writing more, documenting his journey. He spoke at high schools and youth centers. He made free online content, even though he could charge for it. Because legacy wasn't about what he took with him, it was about what he left behind. Chapter 7. The Joy of a Balanced Life. Marcus found himself living a life that was simple, peaceful, and full of joy. He woke up when he wanted. He worked when inspired, not obligated. He spent time with his partner, with friends, with himself. He cooked, he read fiction, he painted, he learned how to say no without guilt and yes without fear. His days weren't filled with chaos, they were crafted. He wasn't chasing anymore, he was creating. That, to him, was the real freedom he had fought for. Closing thoughts. What life beyond wealth really means. Marcus's story doesn't end with a dollar amount. It ends with a man who turned pain into purpose. Who used freedom not just to indulge, but to serve, create, and inspire. Life beyond wealth isn't about luxury, it's about meaning. And that's the greatest success of all.